2 wine glasses, a silk scarf, left in the one room I never let go unchecked. I stood there in the doorway, staring, knowing in my bones that nothing about what I was seeing was innocent. My heart told me to shout, but my mind told me to wait. And that pause, that choice to say nothing, is the reason I'm alive to tell you what I uncovered. That guest room upstairs had always been mine. I kept it polished even when I had no guests coming, because it was the only corner of the house Sierra hadn't yet claimed. My bedspread pressed, curtains ironed, air freshened just enough to feel crisp. I treated that room like a keepsake, because in a house where I'd already handed over too much, it reminded me of what I built with my own hands. So when I walked in and saw those glasses smudged with lipstick I never owned, and that scarf draped across my chair like a flag of conquest, I didn't react the way most women would. I didn't yell. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't accuse. No, I cleaned, because cleaning is what you do when you need your head clear enough to see the truth. I carried those glasses to the sink, folded the scarf, and set it away in a drawer. But my mind was setting its own trap. That night, I reached for a little black camera I hadn't touched in years. My daughter Felicia had given it to me once back when she said, "Mama, you trust too easy." I brushed her off then. But now I realized she'd seen something in me I hadn't admitted. Family can be your sharpest knife. I placed that camera on the bookshelf in the guest room, angled just right, pressed record, and walked out. If I was wrong, I'd catch nothing but dust. If I was right, well, let's just say I was about to know exactly who was eating off my plate while smiling in my face. It didn't take long. 2 days later, when I came back earlier than expected, the sound of laughter hit me before I even reached the top of the stairs. I knew my son, Andre, wasn't home, which meant only one thing. I crept closer, slow, my heart thudding, so loud I thought it might give me away. The door to my guest room was cracked. Inside, I caught a glimpse. Sierra, my daughter-in-law, perched on the edge of my bed, teacups set out like she was hosting royalty. And she wasn't alone. Before I tell you exactly what I saw and heard, do me a favor. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because what I caught on that camera, that was only the beginning. The scarf, the wine glasses, the laughter in the room I built, those weren't accidents. They were warnings. And when I pressed play on that footage later, I realized Sierra wasn't just disrespecting me. She was planning my erasure. When I finally pressed play on that little black camera, I didn't know what I was bracing myself for. I thought maybe I'd catch laughter, maybe a flirtation, maybe proof of Sierra's disrespect in my house. But what I saw and heard went further than I had ever imagined. The video opened with Sierra walking into the guest room, balancing a tray with teacups. She set it down on my nightstand, the same one where I fold my Bible and my reading glasses, like it belonged to her. 2 men followed behind, neither of them familiar. Their laughter filled the room in a way that turned my stomach. They weren't hiding. They were comfortable, too comfortable, in a house that wasn't theirs. At first, I thought this was nothing more than infidelity. That alone was betrayal enough. To Andre, to the vows they made, to the home I built. But as I leaned closer, the conversation sharpened. It wasn't whispers of romance. It was strategy. Sierra crossed her legs, leaned forward, and with a smirk said, "Once Andre signs, it'll be ours. She won't be able to stop it." My breath caught. She wasn't talking about some fling. She was talking about me. One of the men asked, "And if she fights it?" Sierra laughed, not a nervous laugh, but the kind you hear from someone who already believes the battle's won. "She won't. Andre's too tied up to her to push back. He wants peace, not war. He'll let me handle it." I froze the video right there. My own son's name falling out of her mouth, like a pawn she could move across a board. My Andre, the boy I raised on my own, the one I sacrificed for, was being used as the shield between me and the woman he married. I pressed play again, my stomach turning. "She's old," Sierra went on, waving her hand like I was just another obstacle. "She can't keep this up much longer. The paperwork will say the house belongs to Andre, which means it belongs to me. Once that's settled, she'll have nowhere to stand." The men clinked their cups against the wine glasses, laughing at the thought. That sound, their glass meeting mine, felt like someone hammering a nail straight into my chest. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, each second sinking deeper into me. This wasn't about an affair. This was about erasure, about being written out of the very legacy I fought to keep alive. For a moment, I let my eyes wander across the frame. The sheets I'd pressed, the curtains I'd hemmed, the rug I'd vacuumed on my knees. And there she was, sitting like a queen, talking about stealing it all. And Andre, his silence was suddenly louder than anything. Had he already handed her the pen? Was he looking the other way while she carved my name out of the title deed? Or was he just too weak to stop her? I pressed stop, then rewind, then play again, over and over, as if the words would change if I heard them enough times. But they didn't. Each time, Sierra's voice cut the same, cold, sharp, confident. I realized something right then. If Sierra could say all that with such conviction, then she either had Andre's blind trust or his quiet permission. And either way, that meant I was on my own. So I saved that footage. I tucked it away in a place she'd never think to look. Because while Sierra thought she was building her victory in silence, I was already preparing my war in the shadows. The betrayal wasn't just that she was sneaking men into my house. The betrayal was that she had her eyes on burying me alive in the very ground I stood on. And as I sat there, staring at the paused screen, I knew one thing for certain. If Sierra believed I was too old, too tired, and too blind to fight back, she had no idea what kind of storm was coming for her. When Sierra sat in my guest room, plotting how to write me out, she wasn't just scheming over a building. She was reaching for the bones of my life. That house, those walls, that roof, those rooms. It didn't fall from the sky. It was carved out of me, piece by piece, year after year, until there was nothing left to give but the bricks that held us up. I still remember the night I lost my husband. Andre was just a boy then, too young to understand why his father's chair at the table stayed empty. I stood at that same table staring at a stack of bills taller than my hope, knowing there was no miracle coming. If the mortgage didn't get paid, we'd be on the street. And I swore that day, not on my watch. So I worked. I cleaned houses until my fingers cracked from bleach. I pulled double shifts in nursing homes, changing beds and lifting patients twice my size. I sold sweet potato pies on the weekends just to keep the lights from flickering out. Every dollar I earned, I stretched thin enough to cover 3 mouths. And every time I felt like collapsing, I looked at Andre and told myself, this house will not swallow my children in shame. There were nights I slept in the living room chair, because I couldn't afford the heat upstairs. I'd tuck Andre under layers of blankets, whispering promises that one day he'd have more than I ever did. And I meant it. That boy never went without a roof. Not one day, because I carried that roof on my back. Felicia, my daughter, was older then. She saw the struggle, but she hated it. She said I favored Andre, that I poured everything into him while asking her to fend for herself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did hold Andre closer because I saw how fragile he was without his father. Felicia was strong-willed, fiery. Andre was quiet, needing me in ways he never said out loud. But whatever mistakes I made them while keeping both of them under shelter that didn't cave in. Andre grew into a man under that roof. College books I paid for when scholarships fell through. Car repairs I covered when his job didn't pay enough. The wedding to Sierra, even then, when I didn't trust her smile, I opened my pocket to help him stand tall. Everything he is today was built on my sacrifice. So when I watched Sierra on that camera, laughing about taking this house like it was some prize she stumbled across, my chest burned with something I can't put into words. Because it wasn't just a house. It was my husband's ghost, my sleepless nights, my bent back, my children's safety. It was dignity, bought with a price nobody else in that room had ever paid. And Andre, my Andre, sitting in silence while she plotted, that silence cut deeper than the betrayal itself. After all I gave, after all I carried, this was the thanks? To be erased? That's why this fight wasn't about stubbornness. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Because if Sierra took that house, she wasn't just stealing a deed. She was stealing my life's work. And I'll tell you this much. I've lost a husband. I've lost years. I've lost health. But I will not lose the one thing that proves I didn't break. They thought they could bury me in the walls I built. What they didn't know was that the foundation runs deeper than they could ever dig. I didn't confront Andre with the footage right away. A mother knows when her child is already leaning away from her, and if you shove too hard, he'll lean so far you'll never get him back. No, I chose to test him. Subtle questions, small prods, the kind of words that let a man reveal his own loyalty without realizing he's being measured. One evening, I waited until dinner. Andre was hunched over his plate, eating fast, the way he always does when his mind is somewhere else. Sierra wasn't home yet, and I saw my window. Andre, I said softly, if someone came in here and tried to move me out, what would you do? He paused, fork midway to his mouth. He didn't look me in the eye. Why would you even say something like that, Ma? His voice had an edge, not concern, not curiosity, but defensiveness. I studied him while pretending to sip my water. The boy I raised used to meet my eyes when I spoke. Now his gaze slid away, searching the wall, the table, anywhere but my face. I'm just asking, I said, keeping my tone even. This house has been through a lot. People get ideas sometimes. He set his fork down too hard. Ma, you don't need to worry about stuff like that. Sierra and I, we're managing things. We. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Once Andre and I were the we. Now Sierra had taken that space, wrapping herself around him until even his sentences carried her shadow. I leaned back, folding my arms, watching him squirm. Managing things, I repeated. That's interesting, because I remember being the one who managed this house before you ever signed your first check. He flinched, just slightly, but enough for me to see I'd hit something raw. "Ma, can we not do this right now? You always bring up the past. Things are different now." Different. That was his way of telling me Sierra had already redrawn the lines. I pressed once more. "So if someone tried to put me out, you'd stand with me, right?" This time, he didn't even hesitate. He exhaled, long and tired, like I was burdening him. "You know, I don't want no drama. I just want peace in this house." Peace. That word told me everything. Andre wasn't blind. He wasn't clueless. He was choosing silence because silence was easier than standing up. The rest of the meal was quiet. I let him finish, let him clear his plate, let him leave the table without another word. But inside, I was burning. When the front door closed behind him later that night, I sat at the same table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The chair his father once filled. The chair where I once prayed Andre would grow into a man who carried strength, not weakness. And now I saw the truth. Sierra didn't just hold his hand. She held his tongue. Andre wasn't just avoiding me. He was defending her, even against questions I hadn't fully asked. That was when I realized Sierra's control wasn't shallow. It ran deep, woven into the spaces where my son once stood tall. And if Andre had already chosen her peace over my protection, then I was fighting this war alone. It didn't take long for Sierra's whispers in the guest room to turn into actions in plain sight. She stopped hiding her hand. Piece by piece, she began moving through my house like it already belonged to her. The first time, it was a photograph. My wedding picture. Me in a gown I sewed myself, standing beside the man I buried too soon. I always kept it on the mantel. One afternoon, I walked past and saw an empty space where it used to sit. I found the frame later, shoved in a box with old magazines in the garage. Sierra hadn't broken the glass, hadn't thrown it away. She just tucked it out of sight, like I was something to be packed and forgotten. Next came the china cabinet. That set wasn't just dishes. It was heirloom. My grandmother handed me those porcelain plates when I was barely 20, whispering that they'd last longer than most marriages. I polished them every Easter, every Christmas, every time family came through. One day, I walked into the dining room and saw the cabinet half empty. The plates were gone, replaced with Sierra's sleek, modern dishes, black stoneware that looked cold against the wood. She smiled when I asked. "I thought we'd update the space," she said, like it was nothing. But I could feel the weight of every holiday she'd stolen in that one swap. Then it was the basement. For years, I kept boxes down there. Andre's baby clothes, Felicia's school awards, my husband's army jacket. Keepsakes you don't touch, not because they're valuable in dollars, but because they carry a life. One evening, I went down to grab a quilt and found half the boxes gone. Sierra had cleared the shelves, claiming she needed room for storage. My husband's jacket, missing. The quilt, gone. I asked her where they were. She waved her hand and said, "Oh, I donated some things." You can't hold on to everything forever. My throat tightened so hard I couldn't answer. She hadn't just cleared space. She'd erased memory. The boldest move came when I opened the hall closet. For 30 years, that closet held my Sunday hats, wide brims in every color, the kind of hats that told the world I was still standing. That day, I swung the door open and nearly fell back. Every shelf was filled with Sierra's clothes. dresses, shoes, handbags. My hats were crammed into 2 plastic bins at the bottom, bent and crushed. I didn't say a word. I stood there, staring at the mess of fabric and leather where my history used to breathe. And Sierra, walking past, glanced at me with a smile too slick to be innocent. "Hope you don't mind, Mama. We just needed more space." We. Always we. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about style. It was about erasure. Every move she made chipped away at me, stripping my presence out of my own house. At night, I sat in my room, the smallest room in a house I once ruled, and felt the walls closing in. The bedspread was still crisp, the curtains still neat, but outside that door, my name was being scrubbed out. My photographs gone, my dishes replaced, my memories boxed, bent, and buried. And Andre, he said nothing. He walked past empty shelves, past closets rearranged, past spaces where his father's legacy used to rest, and he didn't flinch. Sierra had him so wrapped that he couldn't even see the theft happening under his nose. Or worse, he saw it and let it happen. That was when I knew Sierra wasn't moving in. She was moving me out. The knock on my door that afternoon carried a weight I hadn't felt in years. When I opened it, Felicia stood there, my firstborn, my fiery one, the daughter who had walked out long ago and never looked back. She hadn't aged into softness. Her eyes were sharp, her lips pressed tight, her arms crossed like she'd rehearsed every word before she even rang the bell. "Well," she said, glancing past me into the hallway, "looks like you're still standing. Surprising, considering what I've been hearing." I stepped aside, though my chest tightened. Felicia never came without a reason. She walked in, her heels clicking against the wood, her gaze sweeping over the rooms Sierra had already claimed. She stopped at the mantel, the same mantel where my wedding picture once stood. When she saw the empty space, she let out a bitter laugh. "So, she's already moving you out, huh? And you're just letting it happen." Her words cut deep because they carried more truth than comfort. I closed the door and followed her. "What do you know, Felicia?" She turned to me, her arms still folded. "I know Andre and his wife are circling that house like vultures. And I know you've always handed him the best of everything while I had to claw for scraps. So if they think they can take this place, don't think I'm going to sit back and watch. If Sierra gets her way, then I want my share." Her voice was iron. Her eyes held old wounds I never managed to heal. "Felicia," I said, steadying myself, "this house isn't a prize to be split. It's the roof that kept you safe when there was nothing else. Every brick has blood in it." She didn't flinch. "Blood you bled for him. Not me. Don't stand there acting like you didn't choose Andre every time. You paid for his schooling. You saved him when he messed up. And me, you told me to figure it out." The silence between us thickened. She wasn't lying, not entirely. I had given Andre more, maybe too much, because I saw how fragile he was without his father. Felicia had been stronger, more defiant, more able to stand on her own 2 feet. And maybe I leaned into that strength too hard, letting her resentments fester. But now she was back, not for reconciliation, but for acclaim. Sierra's scheming had lit a fire under her. "You think Sierra's the only one who can pull strings?" Felicia said, her voice dropping low. "If she gets her hands on this house, I'll drag both of them through court and make sure I walk out with what's mine." I stared at my daughter, the one I'd birthed with the same pain as her brother, and realized I wasn't just fighting Sierra anymore. I was fighting the cracks inside my own bloodline. Felicia paced, running her fingers across the table as though testing the weight of her argument. You always said family sticks together. Well, now's your chance to prove it. Either you push her out or I'll push both of you. My throat tightened. Sierra had been trying to erase me quietly, but Felicia's bitterness threatened to split the foundation from the inside out. I was caught between two fronts, the woman who married into my family and the daughter who had been born into it. Standing in that room, listening to Felicia's accusations, I understood the danger clearer than ever. Sierra thought she could outmaneuver me. Felicia thought she could punish me. And Andre, silent, spineless Andre, was the rope being pulled in both directions. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. And this time, it wasn't just outsiders at my door. It was my own blood. People like Sierra make one mistake over and over. They confuse silence with weakness. They see you watching and think you're powerless. They don't realize that quiet eyes can cut deeper than any raised voice. By the time Felicia stormed out of my house, throwing her threats over her shoulder, I already knew I couldn't waste energy arguing. If I fought them with words, I'd lose. But if I fought them with proof, I'd win. So I went back to that little black camera. At first, it sat in the guest room, catching Sierra in her private arrogance. But I got smarter. I moved it little by little. One week it watched the dining room. The next, the living room. Always angled just so, blending in among books, picture frames, or trinkets Sierra never noticed. Each time I pressed record, I left the house and let her think she had free rein. And every time I came back, I found her slipping further into carelessness. One recording caught her on the phone, pacing in my kitchen with her hand on her hip. "He won't stop me," she said into the receiver, her voice dripping with confidence. "Andre doesn't even question me anymore. It's like taking candy from a baby." She laughed, tossing her hair back like the room belonged to her. Another recording showed her sorting through papers on the dining table. Bank statements, bills, my documents. She flipped through them like they were her own, pausing to scribble notes in a little notebook she carried. I zoomed in later, frame by frame, until I caught the words, property transfer. But the recording that burned itself into me most was one where she sat across from Andre, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "Baby, you don't want your mama stressing you forever, do you? She had her time. Now it's ours. Once the paperwork is in place, she can relax. You'll finally be free." Andre didn't answer right away. He just rubbed his temples, looking worn, beaten down. Then, finally, he nodded. That nod, silent, pitiful, told me what I needed to know. He wasn't leading her. He was following. Each clip I saved, each file I tucked away, was another nail in Sierra's coffin. I labeled them carefully, stored them on drives she couldn't touch, hidden in places she'd never think to look. But it wasn't only about collecting evidence. It was about studying her patterns. I noticed how she grew bolder each week, testing how far she could push me. First, moving photographs. Then, clearing cabinets. By the time she threw one of my Sunday hats in a donation box, she didn't even bother to hide it. That arrogance would be her undoing. The more she believed I was powerless, the more she revealed. And I let her. I smiled when she smiled, nodded when she spoke, cooked meals as if nothing had shifted. Let her think I was shrinking, fading, too tired to fight. All the while, I was stacking her words, her movements, her plots into a tower high enough to crush her with. I wasn't rushing. Revenge isn't served in a hurry. It's built slow, one brick of evidence at a time. And Sierra? She had no idea that every step she took deeper into arrogance, I was right there behind her, setting the trap that would snap shut before she ever saw it coming. Felicia showed up unannounced again, this time without the sharp knock. She pushed the door open like she owned a key she'd never been given, storming into my living room with fire already in her voice. "Mama," she snapped, hands planted on her hips. "How long are you going to let Andre and that woman run circles around you? Because from where I stand, you're doing nothing but watching yourself get erased." I set my tea down slow, steady, though my chest was already tightening. "Felicia, lower your voice." She laughed, not with humor, but with the sting of years. "Lower my voice. You should be raising yours. You think I don't hear what's happening? You think I don't know Sierra is tearing through this house piece by piece while Andre looks the other way? And you sit there, sipping tea?" Her words were knives because they weren't wrong, but the wound they opened wasn't about Sierra. It was about her, about the resentment that never healed between us. "Felicia," I said, choosing each word carefully, "you don't know what I'm doing." She threw her arms out. "You're doing the same thing you've always done. Protecting Andre, covering for him while he and his wife strip you bare. You've been favoring him since we were kids, Mama, since Daddy died. He got the car. He got the college money. He got the second chances. And what did I get? The scraps. And now you're letting him sit by while his wife erases you. Don't you dare tell me you're handling it." Her voice cracked, just a little. And in that crack, I heard the child she once was, the child who felt pushed aside every time I bent my back to shield her brother. I stood, my voice firmer now. "Felicia, I gave you everything I had. Maybe it wasn't equal, maybe it wasn't fair, but it was survival. And if you came here to fight me instead of them, then you're only helping Sierra win." Felicia's eyes narrowed. "Don't turn this on me. You're weak, Mama. You've always been too soft when it came to Andre. If you won't protect what's yours, I will." Her threat hung heavy in the air. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, though my stomach already knew. She stepped closer, her jaw tight. "I'll take them to court myself. I'll drag Andre and Sierra through the mud, and I'll make sure the judge hears how they're trying to cheat us both. If you won't fight, I'll fight. And don't expect me to play nice about it." The room fell silent. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was threatening to tear down her brother, her sister-in-law, and me along with them. I saw it then, clearer than ever. My family was a battlefield. Sierra didn't just pit Andre against me. She cracked open old wounds with Felicia, wounds I never stitched shut. And now, I wasn't just trying to stop a thief. I was trying to hold together the last pieces of my bloodline before it shattered completely. "Felicia," I said softly, almost pleading, "don't make this worse." Her eyes burned, her voice cold. "It's already worse. And if you don't act, Mama, then I will. Don't say I didn't warn you." She turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. I sat back down, my tea gone cold, my heart heavy. Sierra thought she was clever, but what she didn't know was that her war had opened another front, one I might not survive if I didn't move carefully. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting to keep my family from tearing itself apart piece by piece. The night after Felicia's threats, I sat alone in my room, the glow of the camera's red light blinking from its corner. For weeks, I had been recording, watching, storing piece after piece of proof. I told myself I was only observing. That patience was my weapon. But as I scrolled through the files, Sierra's smirks, Andre's nods, the conversations that spelled out my erasure, something in me shifted. I waited until the house was quiet, until Andre had stepped out for the evening. Just me and Sierra, moving through the same rooms like two women circling each other in silence. She was in the kitchen, humming as she rinsed dishes, the sound so casual it made my stomach twist. Casual, as if she hadn't been tearing me out piece by piece. I walked in without a word, sat down at the table, and placed a small speaker in front of me. Sierra glanced over her shoulder, raising an eyebrow. "What's this?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Not the light, polite tone she used in front of Andre, but the sharp, ruthless one I'd recorded. "Once the deed's under Andre's name, it's mine. She's old. She won't fight. People like her always fold." The words bounced against the walls, echoing louder than they had when she first said them. The clink of dishes in the sink stopped. Sierra froze, her back stiff, then slowly turned. Her face, I'll never forget it. Shock first, wide-eyed and pale, then a flicker of calculation. She didn't panic long. Arrogance slid back into place like armor. "Mama," she said, her voice sugar-sweet but trembling at the edges, "you've got it all wrong. That's not what I meant." I didn't speak. I just let the recording keep rolling. She'll sit in her little room until she breaks. Andre won't even realize until it's done. Sierra's hands curled into fists on the counter. She laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. "You're taking it out of context." I was upset. People say things they don't mean. Still, I said nothing. I wanted her to hear her own venom fill the air, to choke on the proof that I wasn't imagining it. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You've been spying on me? Setting up cameras? In your own house? That's sick." Finally, I looked at her. My voice was calm, steady. "No, Sierra. What's sick is thinking you could erase me and walk away smiling." For the first time, her mask slipped. A flicker of fear darted across her face before she forced her chin high again. "Andre won't believe you. He trusts me. He'll think you're twisting this." I leaned back in the chair, folding my arms. "Then why does your own voice sound so clear? Why do your own words hang so heavy?" Silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sierra's breathing quickened, shallow and sharp, but she refused to crumble. She slammed her hand on the table. "You think you've got power because of some recording? Andre and I are building a future. You're just clinging to the past. You should be grateful we're even keeping you here." Her arrogance was still there, clinging hard, but the cracks had begun. I could see it in the tightness of her jaw, the way her eyes darted away from mine. She wasn't as invincible as she wanted me to believe. I didn't push further. I stopped the recording, picked up the speaker, and stood. "Just remember, Sierra," I said softly, almost like a whisper, "I know more than you think, and when the time comes, it won't be me breaking." I left her standing there in the kitchen, her face pale under the light, her smile gone. For the first time, She knew I wasn't folding. And that truth shook her more than any shouting ever could. Andre came home late that night. His tie loosened, his shoulders slumped. He stepped into the kitchen and saw Sierra at the table, arms crossed, her face still tight from what had passed between us. The air was thick with a silence that had weight. He looked between us, uneasy, like he'd walked into a room already on fire. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't answer. I just set the speaker on the table again and pressed play. Andre froze. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He turned to Sierra, searching her face for denial, for explanation. She tried to speak, tried to smile, but the mask cracked under the weight of her own voice echoing back at them. I stopped the recording and looked straight at my son. "Andre, this is your wife. These are her words. Now tell me, where do you stand?" His lips trembled. He rubbed his hands together, his eyes darting to the floor like a boy caught stealing. "Ma, it's not that simple. Not that simple." My voice was steady, but the steel in it made him flinch. "She's planning to erase me, Andre, out of my own house. And you're telling me it's not that simple." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, in a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, She got in my head, said it was for us, said it was to make life easier." I felt my chest tighten. "So you knew?" His head lifted, eyes red, shame written across his face. "I knew some of it, not all, but I let it go because," his voice cracked, "because it benefited me too." The room spun. My own son, the boy I carried, fed, built this roof over, had sat by while his wife carved me out of it. And worse, he'd chosen not to see, because it meant he got something in return. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "What did you benefit from, Andre? Tell me." He shook his head, tears brimming but never falling. "Less fights, less stress." She said once the house was ours, we could refinance, pay debts, start fresh. I didn't want to think about what it meant for you. I just wanted peace. Peace. Always peace. His excuse for every cowardly silence. I stared at him, my heart breaking and hardening all at once. "You didn't just let her scheme, Andre. You handed her the knife and turned your face away. You chose convenience over loyalty, comfort over your own mother." He dropped his face into his hands again, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry, Ma. I didn't know how far she'd take it. But I knew. He may not have pushed the plan, but he opened the door and let it walk in. And that betrayal cut deeper than Sierra's arrogance ever could. For the first time in my life, I looked at my son and saw a stranger. Not the boy I raised, not the man I prayed he'd become, but a man so weak he sold his own mother for silence and ease. And in that moment, I understood something I'd been resisting all along. I wasn't fighting Sierra and Andre. I was fighting Sierra and Andre with her. The morning I chose to move, the air felt different. No trembling hands. No doubts. I carried the drives in a neat stack, each one labeled, each one loaded with Sierra's poison. I set them down on the dining table, the same table she once used as her stage, and called them all in. Andre came first, still groggy, his tie half done. Sierra swept in behind him, her chin high, her smile sharp as ever. And then Felicia, arms crossed, suspicion already in her eyes. 3 of them, facing me like a jury. But today, I was the judge. I didn't waste words. I pressed play. The room filled with Sierra's voice. Felicia's mouth dropped open. Andre's face drained of color. Sierra's smile faltered, but she tried to recover, shaking her head. This is ridiculous. She's twisting. I held up a hand and pressed play on another clip. Sierra again, this time flipping through my bank statements. She's got money tucked away. I'll get him to sign those over too. Once it's joint, it's mine. Felicia let out a bitter laugh. So, this is the woman you defended, Andre? The one you let run this house like she was queen. Andre stammered, but his voice cracked under the weight. I didn't know it was this far. I turned to him, my voice steady. You knew enough, and you chose to close your eyes. Sierra tried again, her words sharper now. This is invasion of privacy. You can't just spy on me in my own home. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. This is my home, and you didn't just disrespect it. You tried to steal it. You erased my photographs, my heirlooms, my memories, and you thought nobody would stop you. Well, here's your stop. Felicia's eyes burned into Sierra. You wanted to erase her? You erased me years ago when you thought Andre was the only child worth standing with. But today, Mama finally put the truth on the table. And I'll make sure you choke on it. Sierra's arrogance cracked wide then. She lunged forward, her voice high, desperate. Andre, say something. Tell her this doesn't mean anything. But Andre didn't speak. He stared at the table, shame heavy on his shoulders, his silence louder than any defense could have been. I pressed stop and gathered the drives into a neat pile. Sierra Parker, I said, each syllable sharp, you will not own this house. You will not touch my accounts. You will not erase me. Every plan you whispered, every scheme you built is recorded and sealed. And if you so much as breathe in this direction again, those recordings won't just sit in this house. They'll go exactly where they need to go to bury you. Her face paled, her lips trembling. The same woman who once strutted through my hallways now looked cornered, stripped, naked without her lies. Felicia smirked, her arms unfolding at last. Looks like the crown slipped, Sierra. Andre finally lifted his head, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Ma. But sorry doesn't mend betrayal. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. He was left in his humiliation, staring at the wreckage of his own cowardice. And Sierra? She lost everything. The house she thought she'd own, the accounts she thought she'd drain, the image she wrapped herself in. All of it gone. What she had left was nothing but the echo of her own arrogance playing back in her ears. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't silence laced with fear. It was silence reclaimed, a calm that belonged to me. The photographs I pulled from boxes were back on the mantel. My grandmother's china gleamed in the cabinet where it belonged. My Sunday hats hung neatly in the closet, their brims unbent, their dignity intact. Every piece Sierra tried to erase, I put back in place, not just as decoration, but as proof. Proof that I was still here. Proof that she had lost. Felicia came by that week, not with bitterness burning her tongue, but with a softness I hadn't seen since she was a girl. She ran her hand across the polished table, eyes catching on the pictures Sierra once stuffed away. You really did it, she said, her voice low. You stood up and made her fall. I looked at her, my chest tightening with something between pride and regret. You were right to be angry. Felicia, I gave Andre too much. But don't ever think I didn't love you just as much. This house stands because I carried both of you, even when it broke me. For the first time in years, she nodded without argument. Her acknowledgement wasn't loud, but it was enough. Andre, though, couldn't meet my eyes. He shuffled through the hallways like a shadow, his shame dripping from every step. The recordings had exposed Sierra. Yes, but they also exposed him. His silence, his weakness, the way he turned away when loyalty was demanded. He tried to apologize, mumbled words about regret, but apologies don't patch over betrayal. I didn't throw him out, but I left him exactly where he put himself, in the cold space between a mother and her son, where trust no longer lived. And Sierra? Her fall was as harsh as her arrogance had been high, stripped of her schemes, stripped of her confidence. She became a ghost in her own skin. No title deed, no access to accounts, no power, just the echo of her own voice played back in my kitchen for everyone to hear. The woman who once strutted through my halls now walked with her head down, her steps uncertain, her mask shattered. She lost the war she thought she had already won, and the loss was irreversible. I walked through my house that evening, each room a battlefield I had retaken. And as I opened the window in the guest room, the room where it all began, with 2 wine glasses and a silk scarf, I breathed in the air like it was victory itself. This was more than surviving. This was reclaiming. My house, my legacy, my dignity. They tried to bury me inside the very walls I built, but instead, I stood taller than I had in years. I turned off the camera one last time, tucked it away, and smiled. I didn't need it anymore. My proof had already done its work. My enemies were exposed, my family fractured but faced with truth, and my dignity restored. And when I sat down that night, I didn't whisper prayers of thanks or mutter tired cliches. I spoke out loud, steady and firm, the words that belonged to me and me alone. They thought I was finished. I was only getting started,